Brilliance Audio presents Iron, Fire and Ice, the real history that inspired Game of Thrones. By Ed West. Performed by Rory Barnett. It could take up to half an hour for a burning man to die. The Flemish chronicler Froissart's description of a criminal going to the flames during the reign of France's mad King Charles captures the horror of the punishment. They hustled him on. The fire was ready. A gibbet had been set up in the square, and at the foot of it a stake with a heavy iron chain. Another chain hung from the top of the gibbet, with an iron collar attached. This collar, which opened on a hinge, was put round his neck, then fastened and hauled upwards so that he should last longer. The first chain was wound round him to bind him more tightly to the stake. He was screaming and shouting. As soon as he was secured to the stake, great heaps of woods were piled against it and set on fire. They flamed up immediately. So was he hanged and burned, and the King of France could have seen him from his window if he had wanted to. The stake was a terrifying and agonizing way to die, and so reserved for the most heinous of crimes, and there were few as abominable as heresy. And so in March 1314, the people of Paris had gathered on an island in the centre of the city to watch 4 old warriors being led to their deaths for such a crime. The men were members of the Knights Templar, an order of sworn brothers founded 2 centuries earlier to protect Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land. Over the years, the Templars had grown into a military power fighting a holy war, the most famous order of brothers sworn to take no wives and to defend civilization, recognizable by their white tunics. And yet the brothers had become more than that. With their reputation for honesty and their muscle, and with bases across Europe and the Near East, the group had also begun handling large amounts of money, growing into a sort of international banking organization, enormously powerful and wealthy. But like bankers through the ages, they had become resented. And so when the Crusades were lost in 1303, they were inevitably vulnerable to rival powers. And there was no one more powerful in Europe than the King of France, the country being at that point by far the leading state in the Christian world. France was supreme, in the words of one historian. Her superiority in chivalry, learning and Christian devotion was taken for granted, and as traditional champion of the Church, her monarch was accorded the formula of most Christian king. French was the language of the ruling class in England, Flanders and much of Italy, the language of law as far away as Jerusalem, and everywhere in Europe the language of scholars and poets. Kings of French blood sat on thrones from the eastern Mediterranean to the rocky Atlantic coast of Ireland. French words in their thousands found their way into languages across the continent. Tracing descent from the barbarian Frankish kingdom founded in the ruins of Roman Gaul, the kings of France sat in the royal court in Paris, the centre of the Western world. And the current monarch, Philippe le Bel, the Handsome, was a domineering and icy-cold man, intent on expanding his power. Philippe IV, also known as the Iron King, was likened to a statue for his coldness, or an owl who says nothing but simply stares. The bishop who made that remark soon regretted it. Philippe was a pious man who wore a hair shirt and regularly whipped himself, and those who met him found his fixed stare, his long silences, and his mysterious manner disconcerting. But for all his religious devotion, he was not a man to be crossed, and the punishment dished out to the Templars was not even the worst of his cruelty. Other enemies he had flayed alive. The head of the Capetian dynasty, Philippe's line had begun with Hugh Capet in 987. Further back, the Franks had once been a Germanic tribe who overran the northern part of Gaul and accepted the submission of the Gallo-Roman population there. Embracing Christianity soon after the fall of the empire, they had steadily adopted the language of the native Latins, a tongue that had evolved into Old French. The Iron King had been crowned at the cathedral in Reims, north of Paris, like his forefather Clovis 8 centuries earlier, where the archbishop handed him the sword once wielded by his ancestor Charlemagne, fastening it to the king's side and reciting Accipe hunc gladium cum demi benediction. Accept this sword with God's blessing.